YouTube.
Great. Okay, good evening all. Welcome to our first joint standards meeting over Zoom. Glad you could all make it. Just a few introductory remarks for tonight that I'll read off my phone, so I won't be looking at the screen. This is a meeting of the council which is being held remotely. The meeting is recorded and streamed via YouTube, where members of the public are able to watch the meeting. The recording will be available on the council's website following the meeting. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the council's YouTube page during the recording of this meeting will not be monitored by the council. All members have been provided with the remote committee guidance note prior to the meeting. Please can these be adhered to during this remote meeting? Points include: all mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Please switch your profile to mute unless you are speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand in order the time aware which we excuse me. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand in order the time where you wish to speak. For each item, officers will present the report and the committee will discuss it. After which, if there are any group leaders, deputy leaders present on the meeting, they'll be asked if they have any comments to make, and then I'll speak to everyone in turn. Now that that's out of the way, I will grab my agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence today? I don't think we do. I think we are. Oh, Paul?
No apologies for absence, Chairman, but I'll just take the opportunity, if I can, to introduce remotely, in the first remote introduction, Paula Harvey. Paula was appointed as Head of Legal and Democracy earlier in the year and is also a Deputy Monitoring Officer. So is obviously here and will be supporting the standards process as we go forward. So I just wanted to make that brief introduction.
Thank you. Welcome to the meeting. Declarations of interest from anybody? Nope, no one's read. This is really confusing doing this like this. Okay, minutes from the last meeting. Are we all in agreement for those? Are any issues? If we could, how do we do this? Do we need to raise hands or do we all need to or Paul, Julie? What's the best way?
Yeah, if you can just call each of the voting members in turn. So that's the 3 borough councillors and the 2 local councillors.
Lovely. Okay, I'll go with myself. 4, Councillor Dear.
4.
Councillor Devlin. Oh, you're still on mute, Councillor.
4.
Perfect. Councillor Brockman.
4.
Councillor Blake.
4.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone. Next item on the agenda is the update on the appointment of independent persons.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. A matter which we have discussed a couple of occasions, the Joint Standards Committee, and that culminated in a report and some decisions that were made by full council, I think either earlier this year or towards the end of last. And just briefly to summarise them, the council resolved to retain a total of 4 independent persons. It was keen then to strike the balance between demonstrating or continuing to demonstrate and give public confidence around the independent persons by having appropriate lengths terms of office, but also was keen to retain some of the experience and expertise that we've got amongst the 4 independent persons that the councils are fortunate to have at this time. We're therefore recruiting to 2 new independent person posts. As you'll recall, current independent persons, the 4 terms of office all end in October. So we're recruiting to 2 new ones, and we're looking to extend the terms of office of 2 of the existing 4 for another 2 years. Turning to the appointment of 2 new independent persons first, we have advertised that. Good response, in fairness. I think some of that through the council's social media and through the borough diary. A large number of information packs were requested. I think we've around 7, 8, 9 applications, not sure the exact number, but a reasonable amount. The council's agreed that councillors Blake and McGeorge, yourself, Chairman and Vice Chairman, will do the shortlisting in consultation with myself, and I'll be writing to you with regards to that next week. And they agreed that the panel would be, again, yourself as Chairman, the Vice Chairman, Councillor Blake, and a local council representative. And between Councillor Dear and Devlin, they've agreed that Councillor Devlin will do that. So a 3-member interview panel, which I think is due to take place on the 28th of July. Subsequent to that, we'll make recommendations to Council, and the 2 new independent persons will take office from October. With retention of the 2 of the existing 4 independent persons, as you'll be aware, I have written 2 independent persons just to confirm that they would wish to be considered for that extra 2 years terms of office, and all have indicated that they would be. The council agreed that it falls to myself as monitoring officer and yourself, Chairman, to look at how we, the difficult task really of deciding how we take 2 from 4 outstanding independent persons, but that's a matter which we will discuss in due course, and obviously come back to independent persons on how we might go about that. So I think a couple of summary points really. I think, as we've acknowledged previously, we are fortunate to have 4 excellent independent persons who've served the council well for a long period of time. But we did reflect on the report from the Committee on Standards in Public Life and its views upon the terms of office and ensuring that the public can retain trust and confidence. And there's no reason why they shouldn't have that with independent persons that we have. But I think it's very much around perceptions. So we have kind of responded to that and resolved it. We've also resolved the issue of being able to keep some experience and pass that on to new independent persons. And we've also resolved what's been a fairly long-standing issue of independent persons' terms of office all ending at the same time. And we're actually in a position where 2 end in year 2, 2 end in year 4, and therefore we can ensure going forward that we retain and pass on that experience and expertise of the independent persons. That's the update of where we are. We're progressing towards that, now implementing the wishes of council that were expressed earlier this year. I hope that was clear, but happy to take any questions to clarify any matters.
Lovely, thank you for that update, Paul. Councillor Blake.
Yeah, just a comment. I'm very pleased that I'm on the panel to select people, but it's not often I say this, but I'm very glad I'm not chairman that's got to decide who can and who can't not be on it. So I can honestly say, for the first time in my elected life, I'm very happy that you are chairman and I'm not. What a choice, terrible.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blake, really helpful. I'm sure we'll work it out somehow, it will be fine. Any further comments on that matter? No, lovely. Thank you very much for that, Paul. I've lost my agenda now. Next item from the Local Government Association consultation. Paul, over to you again, I think.
Yes, Chairman. You'll be, again, the Joint Standards Committee will be well familiar, and obviously we're expecting this to come on the back of the Committee on Standards in Public Life report, which you noted, and undertook some excellent work to revise the Code of Conduct in light with the best practice recommendations that were made. And we also took the opportunity to review all the various protocols that supported the Code of Conduct. Again, putting on record, I think, some excellent work by this committee over the last year to really drive that through. You'll recall the Committee on Standards in Public Life, as well as making some best practice recommendations, also recommended to the LGA that a model member code of conduct be produced, and that is what you have before you this evening. So it's been kicking about a little while. It was delayed due to the coronavirus, but no significant delay. It's out for consultation at the moment. I think a couple of comments. We have circulated details of webinars that are being held around this. I think regrettably those are a little later in the day than it would have been helpful to have had them. I think obviously that they're not for a couple of weeks, but I'd encourage members to attend them and obviously feed in their views as part of that. I think you'll have seen the consultation document that's attached to the report. As you see, there's a number of questions in there, and I think we would spend forever in a day trying to agree the response to every question. I think we've presented it to you this evening, and my proposal, Chairman, is that it'd be useful to hear the thoughts and comments of people upon the draft Code of Conduct that is before you. I will prepare a response and will take into account what you have said, so I will reflect what the Joint Standards Committee have said. I suggest then I'd probably get that out, well, I will get that out to all members on the Joint Standards Committee and independent persons just to comment before signing that off with yourself, Chairman. So fairly inclusive process, but I think this evening is about just hearing people's views and helping me to prepare a draft response on your behalf. I think just 2 final points. That doesn't obviously negate people responding individually, whether that be councillors, independent persons or anybody else. So if you do wish to respond, and certainly the local councils may wish to respond, and I'd just be interested in Councillor Devlin and Dia's comments as to whether they wish me to write to local councils to draw their attention to this or whether they're already aware. And I think my final comment really is, having looked at the draft member code of conduct, the model one that has been presented, I don't think it's that far off what we have already. I think there's a point there for ourselves that's therefore how helpful is it, because it in essence creates work for us and detracts us when we actually have an excellent code of conduct in place. But that being said, it is there, and obviously it's useful for us to participate in that. But as I say, encouraging that, I think our model, our code of conduct is excellent and could be used as a model itself. But I'll leave it there. I invite any comments to help me to draft a response on your behalf. But as I say, I will come back out to in due course so that everybody can have input before we respond.
Lovely, thank you very much for that. Just again to reiterate what Paul was saying, the work that the committee has done over the last probably 15 months now, I think where we're at, we do have a very good code of conduct due to the work that was put in. So we don't really want to detract from that too much when it's perfectly working as is. Does anyone have any comments on the consultation? Councillor Devlin.
I have to say, I read through it. I was sort of a little bit of excitement to see what it said. I was totally underwhelmed when I read it. I won't go so far as to say it was a bit of a waste of paper, but in relation to our code, I think it probably was a bit. I didn't feel that it added anything at all. That was my general feel. I may be totally wrong. I don't know. I'm sort of getting the feel that other people might agree with me. However, in answer to Paul's question earlier, I think we ought to bring it to the attention of the local councils. I shall certainly bring it to the association's attention in a couple of weeks at our meeting. And I shall bring it to the attention of our council. But I don't think it hurts for Basildon to also do it. In fact, I think Basildon should be doing it. So I think it's a two-pronged attack on this. We should both mention it. But I must admit, my gut feel is I'm quite happy with what we've got.
Lovely, thank you very much, Councillor Devlin. Peter?
Yeah, there were just 2 quick points actually on it that were towards the independent persons. One was about the fact that they should be able to vote, which is always, I thought, is something that should be there, and how that's worked is for another discussion. But the more important one as well was there was a line in there on page 57 of it that independent persons should have a legal indemnity provided by the council for any decisions we're involved in, which I hadn't thought of before, but could be quite important. So just, I will drop a note to Paul with a few other points I've got, but those 2 I thought were fairly important in terms of just the independent persons.
Thank you very much. A couple of good points there, Peter. Anyone else with any, in case I've missed anyone with their hands? No? Okay. So in essence, I think what we're getting at here is we have a very good code of conduct. It's where we're at. We don't really want to be changing it too much, but if anyone does think of any further comments that they'd like to make, if they could email them over to Paul, I'm sure internally will send them over to myself and we can see what response we'd like. Oh, Councillor Dia.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I think when Basildon Borough Council sends out this LGA Code of Conduct to the parish councils, can it be made plain this isn't a replacement for our Code of Conduct? It is something else to look at, but it's not going to replace our Code of Conduct, because I think this could be confusing. Thank you.
No problem. I'm sure that won't be an issue when that gets sent out. Paul, I'm sure you can come in on that one.
Yeah, no, Chairman, I think a couple of helpful comments, and thanks to Peter, I'll pick that. I'll also check in terms, I suspect indemnity is already in place for your good selves, but I'll just confirm that in any event. I think Councillor Deer's point there just raises a good question, and one that I'm afraid I don't have the answer to, and it might not have been answered yet, but whether the LGA will be just a model code for those that wish to adopt. My sense is that they may actually require us to adopt it, but provide the ability for us to make some amendments as we maybe see fit. But I would hope, and I think from the comments this evening, we would hope that it's there if we wish to take it. But I suppose in some respects, this is targeted at those that do not have a robust code of conduct that responded to the Localism Act with a very short, almost half a page code of conduct. It's probably aimed at them more, and there's a point to which them authorities may continue to feel happy with a very short code of conduct. I suspect that this will be something which we are forced to adopt, but I can't give certainty on that. But I think Councillor Deer raises a good point, that at this time we need to be clear, having recently written out with a revised code of conduct following the work that was done, just be clear that this is just for consultation, and we're not clear on that point around how it will affect the borough council and local councils in the future. So a good point, but one to which I don't have a definitive answer, but we will of course continue to report to the Joint Standards Committee as this progresses over the next few months to keep you updated throughout, and obviously invite comments as we go.
Thank you very much, Paul. My internet is not working properly, so I apologise in advance. So the recommendations that we have for this item, that the Joint Standards Committee considers the Local Government Association's draft model member code of conduct and provides its comments to inform the basis of a response to the consultation, which we have. Anything else, email would be amazing. That the monitoring officer, in consultation with the chairman of the committee, prepares and submits a response to the consultation which reflects the comments of the Joint Standards Committee. Do we need to vote on that, or? Yeah, we do. Okay, I'll go around everyone in turn. Myself, I vote for the recommendations. Councillor Deer.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Devlin.
For.
Councillor Brookman.
For.
Councillor Blake.
For.
Lovely, that's carried. Thank you very much. Oh, too many pieces of paper. Okay, so item 6 is disclosable pecuniary interests.
Chairman, Paul is going to introduce this report, I think, but just obviously it follows on brought previous reports that provided updates on case law, and this was one that I've been keen to bring for a little while. So thanks to Paula for pulling the report together. It has been some IPs who are experienced in this matter, having supported me in a couple of recent complaints. But if I can hand over to Paula just to briefly introduce the report, that'd be great.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This report looks at the issue of declaring disclosable pecuniary interests and considers some recent case law on the issue. The report is for noting and is intended to guide members when considering whether to declare an interest. On the basis that members have read the report, I will simply draw your attention to some of the key issues. Members will be familiar with the relevant legislation, which is in section 30 and 31 of the Localism Act. The extent and meaning of a disclosable pecuniary interest appears to have been considered recently on 3 occasions. 2 of those cases were in the High Court and 1 was in the Magistrates Court. In the first case of Froude, it was considered that the High Court considered, amongst other grounds, a challenge to a grant of planning permission granted to the Oxford University on the basis that the committee chair was employed by the university. In that case, it was held that the relevant councillor did not have a DPI as the decision would not have financially impacted on him personally, as he was not employed by the relevant part of the university. In another case of Kelton, the High Court considered a claim for judicial review, which challenged a grant of planning permission. And at issue in that case was the participation of one of the councillors on the planning committee, and whose vote carried the decision in favour of granting the outline planning permission. It was alleged that the relevant member should have been disqualified from participating because he was a director of a housing company which was named in the planning application, and that company was a probable partner responsible for delivering affordable housing, part of that development. Interestingly, that challenge was dismissed based upon the alleged disclosable. And the High Court held that the councillor did not have an interest in the planning application. Apologies, my internet connection's a little bit unstable this evening. As there was not yet a contract in place between that company. So in that case, the High Court held that there was no requirement to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest. In the case of Flowers, which was considered in the Magistrates' Court, a councillor was convicted of participating in and voting on a matter despite having a DPI. That councillor was a director of a company, and although not in receipt of a salary, he had received various payments in the preceding years. A site owned by that company had been allocated for housing, and the councillor spoke and voted in favour of that matter, although the site in question was not referred to. In that case, the prosecution contended that the member knew that the company would benefit and that he should not have participated. And so the judge concluded that before the meeting, the defendant member should have taken time to consider his position and sought advice from the MO or a dispensation, and should not have taken part in the meeting. So that case can be distinguished from the previous cases in the High Court, which the two earlier cases suggest that for a member to have a DPI which precludes them from voting on a matter, there needs to be a very direct relationship between the interest and the subject matter under consideration. The case of Flowers presented a wider interpretation. However, it should be noted that that was a decision of a Magistrates' Court rather than the High Court, and that case was not appealed. I mean, my advice would be that the narrow interpretation set out by the High Court is to be preferred when considering if a member has breached the code, and this is certainly consistent with both the legislation and the regulations. And the committee is asked to note the report. I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Lovely, thank you very much for that, Paula. Any questions? Councillor Dear.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. The local plan, a lot of councillors were concerned who lived opposite a site or near a site. So this sounds like they shouldn't have been concerned, that they weren't going to gain anything. Is that correct?
I think that interpretation is correct, because it doesn't. They didn't benefited from it personally. So I think the case law that's been considered is quite clear in that. The courts have applied a very narrow interpretation.
I think just to follow that, if I can, Chairman, I think I think Paul is right. I think the local plan's a good example, and the type of matter that Councillor Dear refers to there in terms of closeness or proximity to development sites, and certainly agree with what Paul has said. And in fact, the advice I gave to one of our borough councillors at the time was consistent with this as well. And it was, and the advice to that member was that they didn't need to declare a DPI because it wasn't directly related to them. They weren't directly benefiting. Their interest wasn't in the matter. It was just the proximity to it. So certainly that is the interpretation and the advice that we've applied to borough councillors. And obviously, I don't think advised parish councillors on, but there's certainly advice that we have given in the past, and it's been consistent with the report that's here this evening. So yeah, but it's a good example, I think, that Councillor Deer refers to, and I think the advice is helpful to guide us. And I think when we're advising members, and obviously the recommendation to share this with other members so they're aware as well. Obviously they can place it in the context of this advice and this position that gets there, but the position remains obviously that members should seek advice, or parish councillors, where they do have any queries or wish for further advice on the specifics of their particular matter.
Thank you, Paul. I was actually going to say, can we email this out to all members in light of recent events? Councillor Devlin.
I think what we have to be clear about is the difference between a DPI and declaring an interest. And I think I'm right in thinking that the local plan, many councillors declared an interest because they overlooked a site, but it wasn't the DPI. And there's quite a difference between the two. And I think councillors often get confused between the need to declare an interest and the DPI, because they're quite different things.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Devlin.
Okay.
Sorry, Paula, carry on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yeah, that is correct. Obviously there are different interests where a member could declare an interest, but if it's a non-pecuniary interest, and they can continue to take part in a debate and remain in the room and vote on that matter.
Perfect. Any further comments or questions on that report? No? Okay, the recommendation is that report be noted. So we will leave that as noted on our assistance. Item number 7 is an annual report on declarations of interest and associated matters.
Do you want me, are you dealing with this, Julie?
Yeah, I'll take it. Happy
Brilliant,
to.
thank you.
I was just finding the mute button. Yes, this is a report that we've had every year since 2012. It's a report on declarations of interest and associated matters. So it covers the register of interest, which we still remind members to update every 6 months, as and when it's needed, and obviously they update it whenever they need to. There's a couple of tables there covering declarations of interest at meetings, and you'll see that we continue to get declarations at meetings where they're needed, mainly non-pecuniary interests or lobbying. They do get the odd, I was going to say you get the odd DPI, but over the last year looks like we didn't have any. And also a table covering the local councils in the borough. Apologies, the figures weren't there for Shopgate Parish Council when the agenda was published, but I've now been advised that there were 2 non-pecuniary interests over the year for Shopgate. First, to an audit review that was taken out regarding gifts and hospitality and the register of interest, and that was back in 17-18. All the recommendations from that audit review were implemented and continue to be implemented. So Paul has also added to the report where there's an area of improvement around the declaration of interest and declaring the category of interest. We find at meetings that members tend to say they're declaring an interest. They don't say what it is. They'll just say they've got an interest in a particular item, but really what we need to have from them and we need to record is what the category of interest is and why they're declaring that interest. So whether it's a disclosable pecuniary interest, a non-pecuniary interest, or another pecuniary interest. So Paul's intending to raise that with members, write to members to remind them of the need to do that. And I think that's it. So, oh, sorry, use of blanket dispensations. We haven't had to issue any blanket dispensations. They're the ones where all members have a dispensation on the decision, because if so many of it's an issue where so many of them would declare an interest that they wouldn't be able to undertake the business, and the council would be able to undertake the business, but we haven't had to issue any of them for some time. So if there's any questions, I'm really happy to answer them.
Lovely, thank you very much for that, Julie. Are there any comments or questions on that report? No, I see lots of shaking heads. Okay, so the recommendation on that report is that it is noted, and obviously just to reiterate that Paul will be emailing out to all members just to remind them they need to disclose their interest in more detail than what's currently being completed. Item number 8 is an update on standards complaints. So Julie, back to you.
That's just the update that we have at each meeting. You'll notice we've had a few through this time. We had a little flurry. So there's been 4 in total. 2 of them have already been dealt with and the cases have been concluded. The other 2 are still in the initial stages, and Paul is processing them as necessary.
Paul?
Yeah, just come in, Chairman. Thanks to Julie for preparing the report. Just a bit of an update really for the Joint Standards Committee. And firstly, I think each of the independent persons has supported on one of these complaints. So just to put on record, thanks to them for their time, input and expertise around these, which has been useful, particularly on a couple of them that were a little more complex and were around, so I don't need to go into the detail of them, but the first couple involved a couple of matters, but were also about interests. And the report that Paul has presented to you this evening was something which we also shared the content of with the independent persons that were in that. So complex matter to a degree in getting around that, and different complaints, as I say, in terms of whether members should declare interests rather than the more common people not being as pleasant to each other as they might always wish to be in other circumstances. But those have been concluded. A decision notice is issued, and my thanks to the independent persons on that. On the third one, that has moved on. So we have now issued the decision notice with regards to the third complaint. And just to advise that we have, myself and the independent person, recommended some other action. So it's not no action, but some other action in the form of apology. And we have also stated that if that is not forthcoming on that complaint, then I will refer the matter to the Joint Standards Committee for you to determine what you feel should be most appropriately done. And obviously in that respect, you'd have the options of no further action, other action, or to conduct an investigation and go down that route. I think still got a set of timescale, I think of a couple of weeks for that other action to be initiated. I'm not aware that it has been at the moment. So just to make you aware of that, and that it may be necessary to convene a meeting of the Joint Standards Committee for you to make a determination on how you wish to deal with that. The fourth one, I have met with the independent person and in the process shortly of preparing a decision notice and sharing that with the independent person for comment. But I think I can advise, no details in there, I can advise that that one is no further action is the likely decision upon that. So just a bit of an update on the progression of those, and as I said, to put on record my thanks to the independent persons for their assistance over the last few weeks.
Lovely, thank you for that update, and thank you again to the independent persons. It just proves that you're very valuable. We do need you here. Does anyone have any further comments on any items? No? Okay, in that case, I'll call an end to the meeting and I will see you again soon.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Bye all.
Right.
Thank you.